Good afternoon. I'm Deb Bussinger with Books and Beyond here at the Leesburg Public Library. Today we have a wonderful presentation from Chef Warren, and he's going to be teaching a class, showing a cooking demonstration, and having tastings on Irish cuisine. He says it's not an oxymoron. Hi, Chef Warren. We are so happy to have you here at the Leesburg Public Library.
Well, Deb, it's good to be back again. I love coming here.
I know
Absolutely.
you do. And we also have Lucy Gangoni, our director here at the Leesburg Public Library.
Good afternoon.
So, Chef, what makes you come back to the Leesburg Public Library again and again?
Well, we always have a great crowd here. Very enthusiastic. People seem to really appreciate it. Always great questions, and they come because they love the food too. So, and I like to cook for people. So, put all that together, it makes for a good afternoon.
And what are you doing today?
Well, our show is focusing on Irish cuisine, and as you said, some people think that's an oxymoron, but actually traditional Irish cuisine is not only wonderfully delicious, it's actually very healthy too. So we're going to make a very quick dish. It's called Dublin Lawyer. It's a traditional Irish dish. I like it because you can make it in about 6 or 8 minutes with 4 ingredients, and it'll knock your socks off.
Wow. And what other kinds of demos do you do, and how many do you do, and how long have you been doing this? A lot of questions.
Yeah, I've been doing this about 8 or 9 years. I'm up to doing about 160 shows a year, all the way from Florida to Boston, Detroit, St. Louis. I go pretty much all over the eastern seaboard. And like I said, I've got a bunch this month just because of St. Patrick's Day. So I'm doing a lot of these, Irish cuisine programs.
You told me earlier you're flying off to Boston for 8 shows this weekend.
That's correct. Yeah, I get on the plane on Friday morning and get back late Sunday night, and then I hit the road to hit more shows again next week. A lot of Celtic cuisine shows. Yeah.
Right. So, Lucy, I know you're very busy, but you're taking time out to come to this demo today. Tell us why.
Well, Chef Warren's been coming to see us for at least 7 years now, I think, 7 or 8 years. And we always have standing room only, and I haven't been able to sit in for a couple of times. So today I'm sitting in because I'm Irish.
It's a shame because I always promised her I'd save her a doggy bag, but there's never anything
There's
left
never
at the
anything
end.
left,
No.
no.
So, yeah.
Well, we're really looking forward to it, and thank you again for coming.
Looking forward to it too. Thanks so much for having me. Thank you so much. Please, thank you, please. Stop it, sit down. You're embarrassing me. Stop it. Well, thanks for coming out today. I think we're going to have a great time, as you can see already. But before we get started, I've got a quick favor to ask. I've got my cell phone over here charging because it was running out driving up here using the map. I forgot to plug it in. So does anybody have like a cell phone, like an Android or an iPhone that can take a picture that I can see real quick? Can I see that real quick? Oh, that's a nice one.
You'll never see it again.
Well, that about fills this up. Everybody got another one? Thanks, appreciate it. Well, now you know what kind of cooking show you're in for, okay? Like I said, my name is Chef Warren, and before we get started, I've got a confession to make. I do about 160 of these shows a year, all the way from Florida to Boston. In fact, I'm flying up to Boston this weekend for 4 shows and over to Detroit and St. Louis. And when I travel, I'm one of those guys, when I check into my hotel room, even if it's just for 2 nights or 3 nights, I like to unpack my suitcase and I hang stuff up in the closets. I put stuff away in the drawers. I mean, even if I'm just there for 2 days, it kind of makes me feel like I'm not living out of a suitcase since I travel so much. Anybody else like that besides me? Kind of, okay, there's some people out there like that. Well, that's one of the benefits, is I don't feel like I'm living out of a suitcase. But the downside is, depending on what time I have to get on a plane and fly back home or get into the car to get to my next show, if I'm in a hurry, sometimes I can leave stuff behind, which is exactly what happened last weekend when I was back in Boston and had to fly out of Boston Logan, at wee hours of the morning. I realized I left all my aprons back in my hotel room in the bottom drawer of the dresser. Didn't realize it till I got back here to Florida and was getting packed up and ready to come out to some of these shows and realized I didn't have any aprons. So fortunately, I realized it early enough, I was able to stop at Kohl's and I got this one. Is it gonna work? Yeah. Well, before you get too excited, let me ask you honest opinion. Will you be honest with me? Does this apron make my butt look fat? No? All right, more food for everybody. Well, that's good. We're off to a good start. Like Deb said, my name is Chef Warren Caterson, and I'm author of Table for Two, the cookbook for couples. It was one of the top 100 cookbooks in America. Over 235 recipes, all scaled down for 2 people, which is a minimum of leftovers. You can get all the ingredients in a regular supermarket, like Publix, Winn-Dixie, even Walmart. I don't have anything exotic or cute. And it's pretty much all real food, nothing really processed, and you can pretty much make everything in under an hour, most under half an hour. In fact, I've got quite a few you can make in under 10 or 15 minutes, and I'm going to demonstrate one of those for you here today. But like I said, all these recipes are scaled down for 2, but I wasn't always cooking for 2. Because at one time I had 5 kids at home, so on any given night I was cooking for at least 7, sometimes 8, 9, or 10, depending on who happened to be dropping by that night. And because I had a reputation as being a pretty good cook, I always had people dropping by. So back when I was cooking for that many people every single night, I would do a lot of my grocery shopping at places like Sam's Club, BJ's, Costco. I'd go shopping once a month, and I'd buy the 50-pound bag of chicken breast and the 40-pound bag of pork chops. You know they sell stuff there. 5-gallon drums of spaghetti sauce, toilet paper rolls, 165 rolls to a package. It takes 2 of you to carry it in the house. So I go shopping once a month, and I'd back the Jeep Cherokee up to the garage, get all the kids out there. They'd bring all those big bags into the kitchen and throw them on the countertop. Then I'd get out my hefty Ziploc bags, and I'd break all those big bags down to servings of 7, and I'd label them, you know, pork chops, chicken breast, chicken legs, steak, and put them out in the freezer in the garage. In fact, back then, since I was buying so much food just once a month, and Costco was like Wayne, the other county, I had 2 chest freezers out in the garage. I just kept stock, everything labeled, very organized. In fact, I was so organized, check this out. I know you're going to enjoy this. I even had a chalkboard above my freezers where I had everything in the freezers listed. Then as I used it up, the next month when I went to Costco, I knew exactly what I had to buy. Very organized, very proud of myself, as I'm sure you are too. Oh, please, please, stop it, sit down. But you know what? It didn't make any difference, because when I'd come home from work, and I'd go in the family room where all the kids were laid out, watching TV, doing homework, maybe playing games, and I'd say, so, what do y'all want for dinner tonight? Not a single time did they ever mention anything I had out in those 2 freezers. I'm serious, I'd come in and say, so, what do y'all want for dinner tonight? And one of my wise guy kids would say something like, food, or I don't care, make it quick, something good, I gotta go, those kind of answers. And those of you have teenagers know what I'm talking about.
Husbands.
Well, I tell you what, after a couple of months of that nonsense, I had enough. So one Saturday, I had some time in my hands, I went out to the garage, I opened up both freezers, I took out every single bag, and then I ripped the labels off all of them. Yeah. But then I relabeled them with things like food, I don't care, make it quick, something good, I got it. That way when I came home from work, I'd go in the family room and I'd say, what do y'all want for dinner tonight? And one of my wise guy kids would say, I don't care. I'd go right out to the garage, open up the freezer, pull out a big bag of I don't care, and that's what I made for them. I got them. Of course, they'd all be sitting around the table, looking at what I made, going, Dad, what's this? Of course, I'd say, I don't care. It's what you all want, it's what you're getting tonight. Like I said, my kids are gone now. I find it really hard to go from cooking for 7, 8, or 9 down to cooking for 2. I find myself buying too much food, throwing too much food out, having way too many leftovers. Heck, my kid's been gone for a couple of years now. But I guarantee if you go out to my garage today and open up the freezer, in the bottom, you'll find leftovers from the Clinton administration. I just can't seem to get rid of it, which is why I wrote the cookbook and why it seems to be doing so well. But we're not here just about talking about cooking for 2. We're talking about doing Irish cuisine for 2. Okay, so we're talking about Irish cuisine. We got St. Paddy's Day coming up. And, you know, for a lot of people, that is kind of an oxymoron, Irish cuisine. Because the first thing when you think of cuisine, the culture of Ireland is not the first one that pops up in your mind. You know, there's other cultures that seem to define cuisines better, like maybe Italian cuisine, Spanish cuisine, even Greek cuisine. But when we think of, you know, nice fancy restaurants, our mind doesn't immediately go to Irish restaurants. In fact, you hardly find any Irish restaurants. You'll find a lot of Irish pubs, okay? And that's okay, okay? Because Irish pubs are great places to go. But people go to Irish pubs for the cuisine, like people go to Mardi Gras because they want to pick up some new jewelry. All right, that's not the reason why they go. They go because A, it's a friendly place, everybody knows your name, okay? And if they don't, they're going to find out who you are. The food is warm, it's kind of stick to your ribs, but The Guinness is great, you know, the single malts are great, and when that guy gets up front, he starts drumming the guitar and talks about the origin of this next song, and everybody breaks into a sing-along with whiskey in the jar. There's nothing else that compares it to in American cultures as far as an Irish pub. But the food is good. It's, you know, but if it was served in any other kind of context, it'd be passable, okay? So we don't really go there for that. Now, I thought about calling the show Celtic Cuisine, because I also wanted to cover, you know, Scotland, because on my dad's side, my people came from Ireland, County Tyrone and Donegal, and then on my mom's side, they came over from Scotland, the Isle of Skye. So I kind of wanted to give both sides of my family due process. Now, I was able, when I was studying for this and doing my work, you know, going to culinary school, I read a lot of books on Irish history, on Irish food history, a lot of Irish cookbooks, dozens of them I bought and I just studied. And then I said, well, I've got to get a couple Scottish cookbooks. So I went online and I looked up, see on Amazon, get me some Scottish cookbooks, and there was one. The Scots are even less known about their cuisine than the Irish are. So I went ahead and bought it. I bought the one Scottish cookbook, and when I opened it up, guess what? Somebody tore out the page. Think about that for a second. Yeah, what's the national Scottish dish?
Haggis.
Okay, haggis. Do you know what haggis is? Does anybody know what haggis
Hearts.
is? Has
Hearts.
anybody eaten? All right, I'm Scottish, I've never eaten it, okay?
It's good.
For those of you who don't know, it's kind of like the Scottish national dish. Here's essentially what this dish is. They would go ahead and chop up some sheep lungs, okay? And then boil them until they're tender. You know, chop them up, boil them until they're tender. And then they would go ahead and rinse out a sheep's stomach. And they would go ahead and take the lamb lungs that have been chopped up and put inside the stomach, and then go ahead and add some of the blood from the lamb, and then they'd add some oatmeal, tie the ends, and go ahead and boil it till it congeals, and that's what haggis is. Sounds delicious, doesn't it?
It is good.
That's why you don't see any Scottish restaurants in around, because okay. I mean, you've heard it's coming up St. Paddy's Day. You've heard the phrase, God created whiskey to keep the Irish from taking over the world. Okay? Okay? But God also created haggis to keep the Scots from going in the restaurant business. So we're going to pretty much focus on Irish cuisine here today. But like I said, when people think of Irish cuisine, there's not much to think of. But surprisingly, traditional Irish cuisine is actually a very healthy cuisine as well as a very, very tasty cuisine. So I think we're going to dispel some myths here today. Like when you think of St. Paddy's Day Irish cuisine, what's one dish that immediately pops in your mind? The corned beef and cabbage,
And
okay?
they never
Okay.
cook it in Ireland.
Well, we're going to talk about that. I think you'll be surprised about that. So we're going to cover some Irish food facts like that and all. But before we do, I've got 10, because I'm Irish. I got to promote my heritage here. 10 Irish facts that we would all do well to remember. So if this is like the only thing you take from this, you'll at least go out, knowing a little bit more about the Irish heritage as we come up to St. Patrick's Day. So here's 10 facts that I came up with. Legend has it that St. Brendan the Navigator, discovered America 1,000 years before Columbus. You hear that? The Irish supposedly discovered America. And legend also has it that when he arrived at 10 a.m., and saw that the pubs were not yet open, he got on the ship and went back to Ireland. So that's the 7 Celtic nations, though you might have heard, the 7 nations are Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Isle of Man, Cornwall, Brittany, and Galicia. And that's the 7 Celtic nations. And for nearly 100 years, South Boston has petitioned to be included. But that would have meant reprinting all the 7 Celtic nations t-shirts and all the paraphernalia, posters and other stuff, so it never really gained traction, okay? That was the original 7. Just a few years ago, there were more Polish folks in Ireland than there were native Irish, okay? They came over for work, yeah. That this occurred because Ireland had a surplus of vowels and was running low on consonants. It was purely speculative, okay? One of the largest and most famous festivals in the world starts on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th, when over 500,000 people line the streets of Dublin, okay, to watch the St. Paddy's Day parade. They'll flood the local pubs afterwards and carry on the celebration, which will continue uninterrupted until March 16th of the following year. Irish not a part. Now here's an interesting one. The Irish Academy of Engineers recommends that an undersea tunnel be built to link Ireland and Wales. They envision trains running at speeds of over 150 miles an hour between Roeselare and Fishguard in Wales. Currently, there's no financial backer for such a project, mainly because they have yet to figure out why anyone from Ireland would want to go visit Wales anyway. So, never gained traction either. The tallest identical twins, and this is from the Guinness Book of World Records, ever born, 7 feet 2 inches, okay, were the brothers Knight from Magherafelt County in Derry in 1761. However, due to their size, one Knight brother was born in March, while the other Knight brother was born in April. So. Okay, here's why the world will never run out of Guinness. The original Guinness brewery in Dublin has a 9,000-year lease on the brewery, okay, on its property, and they pay an annual rate of about 45 Irish pounds a year, which is about 75 US dollars. So it's quite a deal, a 9,000-year lease, so we will always have Guinness available, whether it's St. Patrick's Day or not. So hopefully you can take some of that history back with you. You know, I said I'd give it 7 or 10, that's what we got here today. But again, this is not a history class, we're going to talk about Irish cuisine, and here's why it's so healthy. Irish cuisine, from traditionally, I mean, getting beyond corned beef and cabbage and some of these kind of things like this, Irish cuisine was actually a very, very healthy cuisine. Here's why. Because they used a lot of fresh vegetables, a lot of fresh fruit, and they ate seasonally, and Ireland is actually a very temperate climate. So they were able to actually grow a wide variety of fruits and vegetables. So the original Irish cuisine was very much, could have been very, very similar to what we would call the Mediterranean cuisine, okay? There was a lot of fresh fruits, a lot of fresh vegetables. The vegetables that they ate, okay, traditionally in Ireland, was not the potato, although we tend to think that. The traditional Irish vegetables that was part of the normal Irish cuisine would be things like carrots, okay? Onions, kale was very big in Ireland. Spring cabbage, not the cabbage we're used to. Spring cabbage is almost more like a kale. Parsnips, turnips, okay, other root vegetables like that. Rutabagas were very big in Ireland. And then eventually potatoes, okay? But before that, the root vegetables they had were carrots, they'd have rutabagas, they'd have turnips, okay? Which are all pretty healthy root vegetables as far as vitamin A and other minerals and vitamins. So they had vegetables that they would grow on a regular basis that were very, very healthy. They didn't just depend on potatoes. They had a wide variety even before the potato was introduced. In fact, the potato wasn't introduced till later on. And the lump of potato was the one that kind of caught on there, and it eventually became the universal food of the poor, which we're going to talk about in just a little bit. So, fresh vegetables, year-round, okay? They had root vegetables in the winter, they had other vegetables in the summer, so they ate actually pretty good year-round. The other thing they had, which made it very healthy, is seafood, okay? Ireland's an island. So they had a lot of seafood at their disposal, just not deep water fish, but shallow water fish. They had crustaceans, they had shrimp, they had oysters, okay? They had mussels, so you know, this was very much a part of their cuisine too from the beginning. Pretty much just on the coastal lands, and then as they started to build canals, you know, the fish started to make its way, you know, inland. But even the inland areas had lakes and rivers and streams where they could catch freshwater fish and things like that. So we see just on the onset, originally, we have fresh fruits and we have seafood, which is kind of like a basis for a healthy Mediterranean diet. As I mentioned, that the seafood they used was actually healthy seafood, like salmon. Was one of their primary, you know, fish was salmon, which we know is very, very healthy for us with the omega fats. And we talked about the prawns and the lobster. This is what they ate every day. And they just go out and catch lobster and bring it home. They didn't have to go to the supermarket and pay $35 a pound for lobster meat or $65 a pound. They could go out and get it. Milk and butter was very much a part of the Irish cuisine. Brown bread and soda bread were the two main breads that they did, very easy to make and really kind of stick to your ribs. Fruit that they grew in Ireland. A lot of people don't know they grew fruit in Ireland, but blueberries, strawberries, and golden raspberries were always a part of Irish cuisine. So the idea that you know, but you don't see a lot of these vegetables or items when you go to a traditional Irish pub. But this is what Irish families ate with back from the days when they were just even hunter-gatherers, okay? Which really originally what they were. You know, Ireland was populated by hunter-gatherers. They would go, they would fish, they would gather berries, they would gather vegetables. They would catch fowl, you know, pheasants, wild fowl like that. They tended to roam in family clan groups. The idea of even an Irish village, which is so popular now with the church and the pub is kind of the center of it, was introduced by the Vikings. The idea of a village was foreign to Irish culture until the Vikings came in and they kind of set up towns. So there wasn't even any towns that's part of original Irish culture. They were just kind of hunter-gatherers, roaming nomads that kind of stuck together as families, but not as villages where you had tradespeople and you would have bartering and things like that go back and forth. It was until the Vikings came toward the end of the first millennia that these kind of things started to take place. And even some Irish names like Wexford and things like that, and the places that make the great glass works and all are not even Irish names, they're Viking names, you know. So the Vikings had quite an impact on Irish culture. Christianity also had a big impact on Irish culture. Now they arrived before the Vikings, and they brought literacy to Ireland. They taught the native Irish how to read. They introduced dairy products. Okay, they introduced cattle and things like that to Irish culture, which of course meant milk and cream, butter, cheeses, you know, all very much a part of Irish cuisine now. That was introduced when the missionaries came. They introduced grains like oats, barley, which is why we got whiskey and great beer in Ireland, because that was kind of brought over by the monks. They introduced those kind of agricultural products to Ireland. So already, I'm feeling healthier just talking about it. All right? Because even, you know, I'm having fresh veggies, I'm having blueberries, I'm having, you know, golden raspberries, maybe a shot of Guinness, a glass of Guinness, maybe a shot of Jameson's, and already I'm ready to call it a day. Life is good so far. The other thing that Christianity brought was seasons of fasting. Okay, so the original Irish would fast every Wednesday, and they'd fast every Friday. By that, they would give up, you know, meat and give dairy products and butter and things like that. And then they would fast for Lent, and they would fast another 40 days before Christmas. They would fast another 2 weeks in June. So by the time you added up all the different times they fasted, most Irishmen back then were vegetarians about 6 months out of the year when you added up all those dates. Now, that was a religious institution, but it was actually kind of a healthy way to eat, because when you fast like that, it's good for your body, okay, to kind of have that kind of seasonal giving things up, and particularly heavier meats and fats like butter and all, to kind of give that up half the year. But it also allowed the land to kind of regenerate itself. So, you know, you take 40 days off from eating beef or lamb or whatever, it allows that livestock to kind of replenish themselves. So not only was it was probably good for them as a religious discipline, but from an ecological viewpoint, it was probably a very healthy way to eat. And maybe if some of us kind of did something similar to that, I mean, not to be Irish, but we might find ourselves in better shape. Certainly easier on our wallet and on our waistline, you know, if we were to do that as well. When the Anglo-Normans invaded in about the 12th century, they came in from England. They brought the idea of kitchen gardens, you know, where every house would have its own garden and grow their own veggies, herbs, things like that. They introduced other livestock. You know, they introduced more cattle into Irish culture. They introduced more pork into Irish culture. So you see these different people groups come into Ireland and had quite an impact on the cuisine of Ireland. I think made it richer than it was at the beginning, but still very healthy. Now, where things started to go a little bit south is and where this whole potato thing came from. As we talked about, you know, Irish cuisine was a healthy cuisine. They had wonderful farmland. They grew a wide variety of fruits and vegetables. And when the English came in the 17th century, okay, they came in a big way. What they did is they took away a lot of the farmland from the Irish farmers and would use that land to go ahead and feed the English and the Scots, particularly those who were conquering other countries. This is the way they fed their armies, okay? It was courtesy of the Irish countryside, because they were able to grow a lot of good food, a variety of food. So when they conquered the farms, and took that over themselves, and most of that great food we just talked about, all those different vegetables and all, went across to England and to Scotland to kind of feed the troops there. Which is one of the reasons why the Irish don't have a real fondness for the British ever, because that was one of the first things they did. And so what they introduced into Ireland, so that people wouldn't completely be without food, was the potato, the lumper. And so that really became, it was easy for Irish people to grow. It was fairly healthy to go ahead and eat. So that became kind of the main food product for the Irish, particularly the Irish poor, because all their good food was going over to England and Scotland. Now that was good for what it was worth, but if you put all your eggs in one basket, and that basket gets a hole in it, then you're screwed, which is exactly what happened. The potato blight came in, wiped out the potato crops, okay, and that's where we heard about the Great Potato Famine, which forced a lot of Irish to immigrate to the United States. My first relatives came over in that first wave of immigration, and certainly a lot of people died because of it. And that continued on into the 18th century. So it was quite a long time that the Irish were kind of beaten down just on a food level, you know, from the countries that were part of the British Empire. So now you could see why there's still some animosity between Ireland and Britain, because they, you know, that resulted in millions of deaths and a whole, you know, a brain drain of people moving, you know, to the United States and other countries like that. So that's why we have potatoes in Ireland. That's why it's such a big thing. Not because they wanted it, not because they think it's the best thing ever. It's because that's all they had to eat. You know, now things are changing again. It's still part of their heritage. But now, y'all were talking about, you've been to 6 times to Ireland. I haven't been, it's on my bucket list. My kids have been. And they say you go to some traditional Irish restaurants, just not necessarily pubs, and you'll find wonderful food there. You were just saying just within the last 15 years how much the food's improved. There really is a very dynamic Irish cuisine kind of coming back out using all those original ingredients. So the new chefs today are just kind of showcasing that. And so the idea of going in and getting real heavy food, stick to your ribs food, very potato heavy food, you might not find that, you know, in a lot of upper scale and even regular Irish, you know, restaurants. Just not the pubs, but regular restaurants. You'll find really kind of healthy, creative food being produced there. And I see it in some of the newer cookbooks that I'm getting. So we talked about potatoes a little bit, and then we talked about corned beef and cabbage, because we tend to think that corned beef and cabbage is the national dish of Ireland. And for those of you who know about Ireland, know that hardly anybody ever, or even now, eats corned beef and cabbage in Ireland. That is pretty much strictly an Irish-American dish, much like a lot of ethnic cuisine in the United States. You know, a lot of what you get in a Chinese restaurant, people in China don't eat, and even stuff that you get in a traditional Italian restaurant, you know, you won't find traditionally served that way, or Greece. It's just kind of the way it is. It kind of becomes kind of morphs over here. Irish cuisine is no different. But what the traditional Irish dish was, or the national dish, wasn't corned beef and cabbage. Well, the Irish had cows, but they really didn't raise them to slaughter them for meat like we do here. They were too valuable, okay? So pretty much cows would be work animals, and they would be used for milk. That was their biggest value. The only time that they would actually eat beef traditionally was if a cow was going to die, or had just died, then they would go to slaughter. But the idea of raising cattle just to eat on wasn't part of the Irish heritage. And the same with lamb. I mean, we think of lamb, you know, we think of Irish stew, lamb, things like that. Again, lamb, sheep was too valuable to the Irish for their wool and for their milk, for making cheese. So the idea of slaughtering lamb just wasn't a part of the culture. And unless, of course, a lamb got lame, or it died, or it just died, or was going to die, then you go ahead and slaughter it and go ahead and eat it. The main protein in Ireland, aside from seafood, was pork, was pigs, okay? And here's why. Pigs were very easy to maintain. Almost every household had one, because they could live out in the backyard next to their garden. They ate what we ate, so they didn't require a special diet. They just take whatever was left over and throw it out the window, the pig would eat it, okay? Whereas like both lamb and both cattle needed extensive grazing lands. Pigs could just live in a small area, and they ate what we ate. So whatever was left over, whatever slop we had, they go out there and do it. And then when they slaughtered them, they were cheap to keep. didn't require a lot of land when they slaughtered them. The way that they would go ahead and do that, they would have fresh pork. They would go ahead and dry some pork, season it, so they could have pork, you know, for a long time in Ireland. That was a very, very frugal way to have protein. So that was primary. That's the primary protein besides fish in Ireland for centuries. Okay. So the actual national dish of Ireland is not corned beef and cabbage. It's boiled bacon and cabbage. That's the traditional. That's the national dish of Ireland. Now, when we say boiled bacon, I don't want you to get this image of your mind of, you know, you go down to Publix and you pick up a pound of, bacon, Hormel or whatever, and then put it in a pot and go and boil it. To me, that's got to be the least appealing way to make bacon. I want to fry it, So when they say bacon, when the Irish talk about bacon, they mean it like we mean pork. It's pretty much any part of the pig they call bacon, except for the ham, which they do. We call it pork, except for the ham. That's kind of what we call it. In Ireland, it's bacon is what is pork to them. So it's everything, every part of the pig except for the ham. So when they're talking about boiled bacon, what they're talking about is just simmered pork, like we would make like a pot roast. They would simmer it. So it might be the shoulder. It might be a loin roast. It might be, and they would go ahead and simmer that over a low temperature with different herbs and spices, much like we would do a pot roast. And then they would go ahead and serve that alongside their cabbage, which was different than our cabbage. It's not the big cabbage we have here. Their cabbage was more like a spring cabbage, even closer to kale. So it was actually a very healthy cabbage. So they would go ahead and cook this meat, this bacon, and serve it with cabbage. Maybe eventually some potatoes found its way into it or other root vegetables, and that's the national dish, is boiled bacon, okay, not corned beef. Wasn't not frugal enough to make beef. However, when the Irish came to the United States and the different waves of immigration, and they wound up in the ghettos of New York City, pork was more expensive here than beef. Okay, so it wasn't as frugal to go ahead and use pork, so they would make beef, and they were locked in these ghettos, oftentimes next to Jewish ghettos. And of course, the Jewish had their own delicatessens where they made corned beef. Okay, that's what they made. Okay, and they didn't do pork because they couldn't eat pork. So the Irish in New York learned to make the corned beef from their Jewish neighbors, and they just went ahead and adopted that because it was much cheaper than pork, and they would go ahead and make corned beef, and they would make the cabbage that we know as cabbage, because they could go down and pick up a case of it for like 25 cents. I mean, it's not as healthy as the cabbage they were used to, but it was something that was readily available. It was inexpensive, and like I said, you could feed a lot of people buying a big hunk of beef. Okay, because they wouldn't sit down and have like 8 ounces apiece. They would go ahead and almost beef was like a flavoring with this cabbage. The cabbage was cheap, throw in some potatoes, which were also cheap, and they would be able to feed their whole families and extended families on a very limited, poor budget. So that's kind of where corned beef and cabbage came from. It's pretty much just an American invention, which is interesting. A lot of people don't know that. Even cold cannon, that we talk about, was originally made with potatoes and kale instead of potatoes and cabbage. So when they had cold cannon in Ireland, it was actually a little bit healthier dish than we might even get here, as we're making it. We make it with regular white potatoes and with cabbage. Any questions so far? Okay, well, let's go ahead and move on. Now, one thing I do want to mention to you, I want to get some of these recipes that I'm talking about with you today. So if you'd like to, before you go, put your name on my mailing list. Your name and address and city, make sure you write real clear, and I'll go ahead and send you the recipe, not only for what I'm going to make here today. I'll send you a great recipe for cold cannon. I'll send you a great recipe for Guinness beef stew, which is one of my favorites. Okay, again, but not really traditionally Irish, because it was either made with lamb, it was Guinness lamb stew or Guinness beef stew. Again, those food products were not really popular, so they would generally make their stews with pork. But Guinness beef stew became very popular, particularly here in the United States. And it's just very frugal. You take a chuck roast and go ahead and cut it up into 1-inch pieces. And then you sear it in some hot oil or butter. Eat it brown on all sides. Generally, you don't flour it. Okay, a lot of people flour their stuff before you sear it. I advise that you don't do that, because I want my meat to brown. But if I go ahead and toss it in flour, guess what's browning? The flour, not the beef. And what I want that beef to go ahead and sear, because then it caramelizes that sugar, creates new flavors from the Maillard effect. That's when protein like that gets brown, it kind of creates a new flavor, a new depth. So that's what I want from it. I can always add flour later to go ahead and thicken it, but I want to go and do that. And I just sear that in a couple tablespoons of oil. Go ahead and get that nice and brown, depending on how much I'm doing it, maybe in 2 batches. I remove the meat, and I add some chopped onions and celery, and just go ahead and saute that until they're soft and translucent. It takes about 6 to 8 minutes, all right? So right now, I've got about 10 or 15 minutes into this thing from searing the meat and from doing my veggies. At that point, I might go ahead and stir my flour in the oil there with that, so we can kind of thicken, stir my flour, just kind of stir it around a little bit till it browns a little bit. And then maybe add some tomato paste, thyme, and salt and pepper. Okay, just go ahead and add that to it and cook it for about a minute, and then time to open the Guinness. And I go ahead and pour my Guinness in, okay, and return my meat to the pot, and just go ahead and just let it simmer for about an hour. Okay, untouched. So really, it takes a while to make the stew, but it's not hands-on. So I've got maybe 15 minutes, maybe 20 into it so far. Then I just go ahead and let it simmer for an hour. When the hour's up, that's when I add my root vegetables, or I chop some carrots, maybe turnips, potatoes, and I just go ahead and dice those up, cut them up, get about the same size as the meat. Go ahead and throw that in and simmer it for another 20 minutes, and I've got a wonderful Guinness beef stew. So it's a really quick thing that you can make with some brown soda bread or any kind of bread. It's a meal in of itself. Maybe just serve it with a side of salad and with a little bit more Guinness, and you're good to go. Okay, everything tastes better with Guinness. You've seen those posters, okay? So even meals like that are very easy to make. Okay, the cold can is very easy to make. I've even got a shortcut version of a boiled pork, of boiled bacon and cabbage that I'll send along to you. So this way you'll be ready to, pull from maybe 3 or 4 or 5 recipes and have yourself a feast. Now I've got all those recipes in my 3rd cookbook, but I don't want to make you feel like you have to buy a cookbook in order to get the recipes. So that's my gift to you. So we're going to make a dish here today. It's a very traditional Irish dish. It's called Dublin Lawyer. And the reason I call it Dublin Lawyer is because it was originally made with lobster. So like only a lawyer could afford it. Okay? We're not going to make with lobster here. This lobster meat is running about $65 a pound. And so we're going to make it with shrimp, or you can make it with what's known as poor man's lobster, which is, what is that called? Monkfish. Monkfish. You ever had monkfish? All right. If you like lobster, they don't want to pay a lot of money for it. I get monkfish at my local supermarket for $8.99 a pound, which is a lot less than $65 a pound. And it tastes a lot like lobster. You can make it with that. And the other reason I like it is I can make it in about 6 to 8 minutes with 4 different ingredients. Okay. So it's going to be fun. We're going to use some Jameson's Irish whiskey. Okay. Now the Scots also make whiskey, but the Scots are a lot more frugal than the Irish are. So you'll see that Irish whiskey, the word whiskey is spelled with an E, W-H-I-S-K-E-Y. The Scots, being frugal, don't want to use more letters than they have to, so they spell it W-H-I-S-K-Y. Okay, so that's how you tell Irish and Scottish whiskey. The other thing too is that this is distilled like 3 times. Okay, and the Scots, being frugal, just do it twice. Okay, so that's the kind of difference between the 2 different ones. So we're going to make this very traditional. We're going to use Jameson's. We're going to use some cream. We're going to use some butter, some Kerrygold, which is great butter, very traditional, and we're going to use what's known as Argentinian red shrimp. This is shrimp that probably tastes as close to lobster as any shrimp can. If you can find it, sometimes Publix carries it for like $8 or $9 a pound. My grocery store down in Sarasota, Detweiler's, carries it year-round, and sometimes you get it on sale for like $4.99 a pound, which is when I stock up. But that's what we're going to use in place of the lobster here today. And it's a rich dish, which also may be why they call it Dublin Lawyer, because not only is it expensive, but it's very rich. So this is not something that you want to have every night or even every week, right? This is for special occasions because it's very rich. But the nice thing about it, you really don't need to serve anything with it. So when you serve this, the only thing you really need to serve alongside of it is maybe some bread and a salad, because it tastes very rich. Anything else would kind of compete with it. Okay, so we're going to make a traditional Dublin Lawyer here. So I'm going to go ahead and heat up my pan over about medium heat. It's also a very easy recipe to memorize because everything is in thirds, except for the shrimp. So we're going to use about a pound of shrimp, 3/4 of a pound to a pound of large or extra large shrimp. And heat my pan up over medium heat. And then I'm going to add about 1/3 a cup of my Kerrygold butter, okay? Like I said, we're doing it traditional. You can go ahead and get Land O'Lakes if you want, whatever. Or if you want to cheat a little bit, you can use half butter and half olive oil, okay? But we're doing it traditional. So we're going to go ahead and use our Kerrygold, 1/3 of a cup. So you can see why this is not something you would serve every night. But on a special occasion, this is well worth it. Just going to let our butter melt. And then I'm going to go ahead, in the meantime, just chop up some parsley. We're just going to use this as a garnish. And because this cooks so quickly, you want to make sure you have all your ingredients together. Even though it's only like 3 or 4 ingredients. Melt this. And as I mentioned, I do have 3 cookbooks here. I've got Table for Two, the cookbook for couples. It was my first cookbook. People enjoyed it so much, they wanted more recipes, so the publisher had me come out with a sequel, Table for Two, Back for Seconds. It's got 235 different recipes. And then my 3rd cookbook came out since the last time I was here. It came out just a couple weeks ago to the bookstores. It's called Cooking Outside the Lines, The Musings of an Extemporaneous Chef. You like those big words, huh? And that's a cookbook for people who like to read cookbooks. So if you like to sit down, pour a cup of coffee, glass of wine, and sit down and like read a cookbook, that's the one for you. That's the cookbook that has 2 whole chapters just on Irish cuisine with a number of different recipes in it. So these recipes will be in it. Like I said, I don't want you to feel like you have to buy the book to get it, but I do have them available here. I'm going to go ahead and add my shrimp. Now you see why they call it Argentinian red, because it almost looks cooked.
So that's 1 pound.
This is a little bit more than 1 pound, so I'm feeding everybody. But normally I would use 1 pound. So if you're taking notes, I'd use 3/4 of a pound or a pound, depending on how much you love your shrimp.
To 1/3 cup of butter.
Yeah. Everything's to be 1/3 cup. So I'm going to add my shrimp. So I want to make sure everybody got some. And we really don't want to cook shrimp, folks. We just want to threaten it. Okay? Which will only take, depending on how cold it is, 3 to 5 minutes. So it starts to turn pink and get a little bit firm. Now this shrimp here is already pink. So we're just going to cook it 3 to 5 minutes till it's firm. Because one of the reasons we may not enjoy, kind of pan-seared or pan-sauteed shrimp like this when we go out to eat, like the shrimp scampi, because by the time they bring it out to you on that sizzling platter, the shrimp's been cooked so long, you got these little pink hockey pucks, okay? So we don't really want to cook our shrimp, we just want to threaten it. Which won't take very long. Now my shrimp was very cold here, colder than you'll have it when you take it out of your fridge, because I brought it up here from Sarasota and keep it very cold. So it might take a little bit longer to go ahead and do it. So we have 1/3 a cup of butter. I'm going to add a little bit more because we're making more for more folks here. Make sure everybody gets some. But if you're taking notes for the recipe, we're talking 1/3 a cup of butter, 3/4 a cup. So again, 1/3 of a pound of shrimp, 1/3 cup of butter. It's one of those times when, like I said, you don't have to use the Kerrygold, but if you want to make this the real deal and you're only going to do it a couple times a year, go all out. We're going to make it as rich as possible. I have a motto in my kitchen,
Any more?
moderation in all things, right?
Any more Kerrygold costs about the same as any other kind of butter.
Well, and particularly if you get it on sale. I buy it when it's like buy one, get one at Publix. So we got that going. Going to cook that up. Then we're going to add 1/3 a cup of Jameson. You can use any other kind of whiskey or bourbon, but we're trying to be a little traditional here. Now, normally what I would do here, folks, if I was making this at home, is I would go ahead and I would put my whiskey, no, I wouldn't. I would go ahead and put my whiskey in a small saucepan and just kind of heat it a little bit before I add it, because what we're going to try and do is flambe it, just kind of like that, baby. I'm not sure if we'll be able to do it here, because I'm not sure it's going to be hot enough. We'll give it our best shot. But I would just go ahead and take whatever whiskey I have, put it in a little saucepan, keep it on the side, and just go ahead and heat it. That way when I add it to my pan, it's already going to be hot. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and add my whiskey. A little bit more. Now you notice when I'm adding my whiskey, folks, I'm not pouring it directly from my bottle into a hot pan on my stove. I don't want you to get in the habit of pouring anything with alcohol in it into a hot pan on your stove. I mean, it probably won't happen with wine, but if you're using something strong like a whiskey or a cognac or a brandy, and you pour it directly from a bottle into a hot pan on your stove, you run the risk of having that stream ignite, come up in the bottle could explode like a Molotov cocktail. And let me tell you, nothing ruins a dinner party more than setting off a Molotov cocktail right in the middle of the dinner. Now this actually happened a couple years ago in a seafood restaurant north of Dunedin, Florida, with an elementary school teacher having a birthday party. She wanted banana Fosters for dessert. The waitress brought out her little table, made it a table side, you know, with the little Bunsen burner thing there. Started to pour the rum in. Sure enough, the stream ignited, came up in the bottle exploded table side, all over the birthday girl. Her dress went up in flames just as if someone had doused with gasoline, lit her on fire. Everybody started screaming at the seafood restaurant. And then fortunately, one of the guys working in the kitchen was studying to be a paramedic during the day. He looked out, saw this woman on fire, ran out, threw her off the chair, rolled her across the floor, and put the fire out. In spite of his quick thinking, she was still burned over a significant part of her body from the waist up. Her legs were spared because they were underneath the table. It didn't get splashed. Okay, this made national news. So you notice what I did. I didn't pour it directly from the bottle. I know it looks dramatic. I put it in a cup, took my pan off, added it. I know it doesn't look as dramatic as doing this, but hey, I never blowed myself up, and I don't want you to either, okay? So you always want to go ahead and take it off. I even do it with my wine, even though it probably won't happen. It's just a good habit to get into. All right, we're just going to go ahead and give this a shot here, okay? Like I said, normally I would go ahead and just heat my scotch and my brandy off heat. If the lights were out, we could do this. It might not go, because it might not be hot enough. I don't want to wait until it gets too hot, because then the shrimp's going to be overcooked. But if you're going to do this at home, go ahead and heat your scotch and then add it so it's nice and hot by the time it hits. Let's see. One more time. It's a nice effect. All right, we're going to do plan B. You ready? You ready?
Yes.
Ooh. Say it. Amazing, huh? So, if you want to, you don't have to flambe. You just want to make sure you cook it long enough for something to the alcohol to mellow a little bit. Okay. And now we're going to go ahead and add a third cup of cream. And just a little bit more. I'll stir that up. Now, people often ask me, I'm cooking with my scotch here, my whiskey. Is it true that the alcohol burns off when I cook with a whiskey or with wine or whatever? It's almost in every cookbook I own. But I'm here to tell you that's an urban myth. Okay, all the alcohol doesn't burn off. In fact, when you do this flambe here, you light that whiskey or cognac or brandy on fire, when that flame dies out, up to 60–80% of the alcohol remains in that dish. So you want to be careful that you don't serve this to someone who might be suffering from the disease of alcoholism, okay? Or they because of religious or social reasons, they go ahead and don't partake. I just want to let you know that before you put it out, because all the alcohol doesn't burn off. And I know that because back in 1991, researchers at the State University of Washington State University and USDA did extensive tests on alcohol retention in cooked food. and they cook just about anything. You can cook with wine or spirits, and not in a single instance did all the alcohol burn off. Now, the longer it cooked, like a beef burgundy in your oven, more of the alcohol might evaporate, but it doesn't completely do so. Like I said, we do this flambe, anywhere from 65 to 80% alcohol remains in that dish, okay? So you just want to keep that in mind. If either you or somebody in the household suffers from the disease of alcoholism, then you may want to kind of stay away from dishes like this. Now I'm just going to and put this out on plates. And I'm going to pour the sauce over it. And I've got some toothpicks and napkins. I'll put one plate over there, and we'll put one plate up front here. Like I said, if you want to impress friends on St. Patty's Day with a dish they probably never had, this is a great dish to introduce them. And they will go home and make it themselves over and over and over again.
Which was what was blowing out the map.
I'm just going to go ahead and pour this wonderfully rich sauce on top. You want to serve this in shallow bowls if you can. When you're serving it to your guests. Now we're just going to finish it off with some chopped fresh parsley. I want to hold my hand about 11 inches above so you get a nice even distribution. Plus it looks like the guy's on TV. You always want to look good in the kitchen, because that way even if your meal comes out mediocre and you ask your guests, so how was dinner tonight? Oh, it was kind of okay. But man, you look good in the kitchen, so always want to look good. So it makes for a nice presentation here. I wish we had a camera mirror above it because it does look good. Let's put a little bit more sauce in here. I'm going to try and bring it over, carry it over. And again, thank you for coming out to my show today. I hope you had some fun. Hopefully I'll be back. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. And if you want to get a cookbook, I'll be glad to sell it. They're $20 even. That includes the tax. That's about what you pay at Barnes & Noble or Target. Plus I can sign it for you. I take all major credit cards, cash, checks. If you have a cute niece, my son's looking. After the show. How old is he? He's 22, and he's actually manages a restaurant in San Diego. Not a bad gig. So anyway, so I would say bon appetit, but this is St. Patty's Day, so I'm saying Schlante. Enjoy.
Hi, I'm with Chef Warren Catterson. He just did a demonstration on Irish cuisine at the Leesburg Public Library. How do you think it went, Chef?
I thought it went great. We had a great audience. People seemed engaged, had some great questions. I mean, there's no food left, so that's got to be a good sign. But I love coming here, and I'm looking forward to coming back. We'll do a different show and have some more fun.
And today you made what?
I made Dublin Lawyer. It's a traditional Irish dish that's usually made with lobster, which is why I guess they call it Dublin Lawyer, because only a lawyer could afford it. Mm-hmm. But at $55 a pound, it's not really frugal. So I made it with the Argentinian red shrimp, which is has very close taste, similar to lobster, and it's certainly a lot less expensive and very simple to make. 4 ingredients, 6 to 8 minutes start to finish, very rich, and people seem to really love it.
And it smells delicious. So if you come back and see us again, what do you think you'll be cooking for us next time?
It's up to you. I've got 25 different programs that I do. Some of it based on cuisine, some of it based on particular ingredients, some of it based on seasonal, like Christmas or, So it depends on what time you have me back, but whatever we do, we'll do something fun, creative, and everybody will have a great late lunch as well.
Well, they all love seeing you, so thank you so much for coming, and we'll see you again.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining us today on Books and Beyond with Chef Warren. And I'd also like to tell you about some exciting things we have coming up at the library soon. March 18th starts spring break with the local schools, and we have spring break here at the library with circus class, scratch code camp, a puppet show, and Celtic music by the Kilted Man. We have something for the whole family. Scratch code camp requires registration. We also have several technology classes coming this month, such as Beginning Computers, which is a new class specifically for the very beginner. If you really need beginning skills on a computer, this is for you. Another new class is Password Manager and Windows 10 Privacy, iPhone and iPad Basics, and there's more. Let us know if you would like to find out what else is happening in technology classes, you can either come in and get a newsletter, you can call, you can go online. Our website is leesburgflorida.gov/library. We also have a Facebook page, Leesburg Public Library. And please come in and stop in and get a newsletter and sign up to receive our e-newsletter. Thank you very much.